Okay, so let's begin. My name is Johan Lindfors. I have a small company called CodeRocks. It's just actually just me. So I'm doing native Windows client development. Currently, I'm contracted by King, helping them realize their games on Windows, and have been there for like 4.5 years. Which is a really amazing technology stack to work on. And I've always wanted to be a professional game developer, and apparently I think I can actually call myself that now, which is fun. My kids love that. They really didn't enjoy when I said I was working for Microsoft. They was like, "What? What is that?" But now I work on Candy Crush. They're like, "Yeah, that is cool again. That's fine." So I have been attended the SWETAG conference for a couple of years. I've been sponsoring it as well because I think it's a really awesome conference. I think it's really cool that the conference is very focused on like DevOps and people and processes more than like professional developer conferences is like talking more on languages and technology. I think that's really keen and cool that people, the community is interested in these types of topics and not just focused on details. I think that's really interesting. So I've been talking twice at SWETAG earlier. I talked about Windows Phone. Did anyone use Windows Phone? Yeah. Apparently it's a forgotten platform now. And I also talked about how to talk to kids about programming and how, did anyone listen to that last year? That is also really two cool topics, and I would love to discuss that afterwards. I do that annually a couple of times to help kids try to learn development using Python or different type of languages. It's really fun. But today I want to talk about the possibility and the opportunity that we have on the Windows platform, the Windows desktop market. And as I mentioned earlier here, it might be a sort of a forgotten market or something that people are not really focused on investing on, but the numbers actually tell us differently. And they say it's like a couple of millions of developers that build applications on Windows. And the numbers that you represented here, like WinForms and WPF, C++, that pretty much sums it up. Actually, there are a lot of people, developers, that still write WinForms application, file new Windows WinForm application in Visual Studio 2019 even as well. And it's something that Microsoft has really listened upon and tried to act upon, because it's not only UWP that is the future for Windows client development. So that's something we're going to talk about and demonstrate as well during this presentation. So there's a lot of people like you that build these types of applications, and there's a big opportunity in the market which we can target with these applications. This is kind of old numbers, like a couple of months at sea, and it continuously is growing, the Windows PC platform. The problem we've had, though, is that we've had a choice, and this is something I will come back to. Like, people love choices, but we don't want to choose. It's like we want to have the opportunity, or the feeling that this is. I have a lot of options to do. I'm not forced into anything. But when it comes to choosing a technology stack or a platform or something, I want someone else to tell me that this is the right way to do it. Because then I can also say that, hey, I failed, but you told me to go here. So it's someone else's fault that I failed. But we want to have these choices. So the choices we've had on the Windows platform is that we had two platforms to choose upon. We've had the desktop application platform, which is pretty much the native Win32 or the WinForms, the WPF, or the line of business types of applications. Really powerful, native, using like the hardware and such. And then we had the modern application platform, which is more like touch-based, touch-friendly, coming from the phone background. The context of the user in the modern application platform is that it's a mobile user. Mobile being not only on the phone, but like in transit or sitting in the bus or something like that, and using these touch screens. But while the desktop application platform is a more desktop environment, sitting in maybe a couple of monitors and stationary computers and such. So this is historically the problem we had. Which one were we going to choose? And what Microsoft has done the last couple of years is only talked about this one. This one has pretty much been forgotten. So if you haven't been here the last couple of years, feel safe that we're coming back pretty much. So we want to bring these powerful features on the desktop application platform into the modern world, and the modern features like what those are into these desktop environments, like being robust and secure in when it comes to deployment and such. So being a modern client application, this is something that Microsoft usually talks about when they tell people that you should write a modern application. It should have a rich user experience. That is pretty much why we build client applications. We want to leverage the hardware that exists. We want to use the latest technologies and innovation that comes up, like AI, machine learning, the great capabilities of these PCs, like dials and mixed reality such, which you can't use web applications for, pretty much. You also want to have sort of a simplified and efficient distribution, meaning that we want to have this application being installed and removed. I think when you looked at Chris Klug's presentation earlier today, the Docker, the containerized way of deploying web applications and such, is pretty much what we want to do with client applications as well. We don't want to have leftovers when we remove an application. We also want to make sure that when we install a client application on a PC or a desktop, it should be a safe install. We don't want to have stuff coming in like malware or viruses in this application. We want to be safe. This is the intended purpose of this application. And also, naturally, it has to be connected to the web or connected to the cloud. We have to have that type of features. So once again, we have choices. And once again, Microsoft will not tell you you should be doing this. I would love to have them to say that Universal Windows is the way forward. That's the only way you have to focus on. Migrate everything, but it's not the way. And it might be a good thing. I'm curious understanding if you think that this is a comfortable way of moving forward, but we have a choice. We can use Universal Windows Platform. That it's a rich platform which has the latest technologies, latest controls, latest experiences. It's also there where Microsoft is investing heavily when it comes to features and those types of things. But we can still write Win32. We can still use like C++ Windows applications, and we can do that with great power and great responsibility naturally. We can use WPF WinForms, and we can use other types of technologies. We can use Program for Web Apps. We can use Electron. We can use Xamarin Forms. We can use different types of technologies to build these rich client applications. But as I mentioned, I want to focus on the three top ones and talk about those. So when it comes to Universal Windows Platform, one thing that I always tell developers that they should really look into, and I hope that you already know about this, is the Windows Template Studio. Are you familiar with this community toolkit? Pretty much, it's a toolkit available. This is a guide that installs into Visual Studio, and it helps you create new applications. And this might be only for demonstration purposes, but it's still something that I value as a developer, even though I'm not creating new types of applications. I download this template whenever I install a new version of Visual Studio. I install this package, and I use it just to learn how Microsoft recommends that we build these type of client Universal Windows application. It's a wizard-based setup, and it not only gives a file new dialog, it's also what are the patterns that we really should invest in looking into. So I want to show you just a quick run how this works. So I just, in Visual Studio 2017, go for, new. Let's do it with keystrokes instead, or not. So I have to install this Windows Template Studio, and it gives me this wizard base. So first I have to choose what type of application do I want to build. So I can use a navigation pane, which is sort of like the hamburger menu I have, or I can use a blank application just to investigate different types of views, or I can use a horizontal navigation pane. This is pretty much more like the Windows 8 type of with pivots and such. So I can choose the navigation pane. Then I go for a design pattern. And this is also not that strange. I have either a code behind pattern, meaning that it's traditional how we do WinForms pretty much, or I can do a MVVM version. and I can choose different frameworks. This is pretty cool because I can inject other frameworks in here as well. So I can use a basic MVVM. I can use different like Caliburn or Prism or MVVM Lite if I want to use that. And then I get to choose which type of pages I want to do in this application. And when you should try this out, you should pretty much select all of these pages just to see how they are created and how they work. Just to understand this is the way to build a media player view or a settings view or like a data grid using Telerik or something like that, a chart, a map view. So there's a couple of interesting views you can use here. And then you can also choose features, meaning it's more like a backend service or helpers that you can use in this application. You have a lot of cool stuff here as well. I think like in the latest version, the 3.0 of this template studio, they introduced this 3D app launcher. If you're building like HoloLens or mixed reality applications, you can use this 3D app launcher of that application still, even though you are in a two-dimensional area when you do this application. And there's other cool stuff here as well. So you should really look into this. When you then run this guide or this wizard, it will take a while. So I have prepared this as I thought I did. Let's open it up. Here we go. So I have this application set up for me. So this is pretty much what it creates for me as well. And what's also interesting in the latest version is that it will actually create a multi-project solution. So it has this .NET standard library, which is references, which is meant for us to put the common code that is based on the .NET Core, .NET Standard version. And then we have something that is more platform specific or Universal Windows specific here. And I have the views, and I can just run this just to see how it looks. So I integrated something like the first launch guide or the first launch view, meaning that this is a pattern that I can use in my application, saying that this is the first time you launch that application, welcome, replace this with your styles and style messages. And there's a similar message saying like, also this is in the new version when you upgrade and such. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this. So really you should look into the Windows Template Studio if you want to do universal Windows applications in C# or such. Okay, so that is if you are investing in new applications using C#, the Windows Template Studio. If you are using C++ and you try to do Universal Windows earlier, there was something called the C++/CX. I don't know if you've tried it. It used to be called Managed Extensions to C++ and such. It really didn't get traction, and it got a lot of negative feedback from the C++ community because you introduce stuff into the language or through the compilers using this hat syntax, which is a reference-based instance of a class or something, and that broke a lot of build systems and different compilers and such. So what Microsoft have done now is actually they hired a super smart guy called Kenny Kerr, and he has written a C++ header-only library, which is a projection of the Windows runtime, meaning that it's a pure C++ ISO standard, and it requires though C++ 17, which is fine because then we get to use like kind of the latest versions, and it exposes all of these APIs, and it's a really nice way of doing development. And so I want to show you, even though you're not a C++ developer, you should really check into this. And I was asked also earlier when I came here, so how long have you been doing these type of sessions, Johan? And I realized that I've been doing it for way too long, because when I thought I want to do a demonstration, I have this also on the GitHub Code Rocks. You have all the demonstrations I will present today. If you want to check it out, it's called Tech Days 2018. Sorry about that. It is old demos, but it's upgraded to the latest. But I also said that I want to do something more cool than just a file new application in C++/WinRT. So I want to do something better, something that would probably be appreciated by the Universal Windows or WPF developers. I want to do an MVVM solution. Yeah, that would be cool. I wonder if someone has done that before. This was me yesterday, actually. So I went up to Google, I said C++/WinRT MVVM. Hit enter, and the first link is a repository on my GitHub. So apparently I thought this was cool also a couple of months ago, and I did an MVVM implementation with C++ WinRT, and I forgot about it entirely. That's what you get when you do game development. But so you can also download that if you want to as well. And it's also I have to upgrade that to the latest, the version that was released yesterday. So if you want to try that out. Okay, so what is that all about then? Well, let's see where we have that. So how does it look? Well, it looks pretty much similar to a UWP application in C#. We have this app XAML, which is the application setup. We have a main page as well, with XAML as well. The main difference here, I think, is that we have these IDL files. And these IDL files are the interface definition language, which describes the interface that actually the Windows runtime or the different languages can use to communicate and consume these type of applications from outside their compilation units and such. So we have this IDL file describing that this is a main page, it's inherited from the page, and exposes a constructor and exposes this view model as well. And then the compiler will actually help us and generate some header files, which I can then just copy into this project, and also CPP files with implementation. And here I also have then instantiation of the view model. I have view model here as well. Initialize component. This is pretty much what you see in C# as well in the code behind. I set the data context to be view model. I can return the view model. What's more? We have Solution Explorer. I have some frameworks components like a bindable base, like a view model base. I have the delegate commands. I can expose these types of commands exactly as like MVVM Lite or a basic MVVM framework would do it as well. So I can do all of that in C++ instead with strictly header file. And just to prove that this is actually C++, I can do some pretty cool stuff in the main view model. Here's like hooking up a delegate command to methods in the view model. So I have two methods. I have this click up here, which takes an object, or an IInspectable it's called in WinRT. And I can do stuff with that. I can unbox and box it as an H string, which is pretty much an stdv string. Or I can call other methods and another click, which is a void method and no parameters. And I can just hook them up to this click command by using like different types of C++ constructs. I can use stdbind, I can use lambdas, and you can look at this code if you want to see, and it just works, and it's pretty cool. And it's really nice to get up and running. It takes a while to build something more constructive, but it's nothing that you should be scared about if you're a C# developer. It's instead consider it to be a sort of a ladder or a stepping stone into C++, and you will feel pretty comfortable running it. So it's a really cool technology. And the cool thing with it as well is that Microsoft is really adhering to it, they're using it themselves. So they are building their own stuff with C++ WinRT instead of using C++/CX. So it's really cool. Okay, so that's pretty much the C++ thing, and if you want to talk about that more, please talk to me afterwards. But then we have these people, and there was a lot of you that have written .NET Framework applications. And you might be considered like where are Microsoft heading with .NET Framework, and you also heard about the .NET Core. And specifically, if you heard about .NET Core, there was a .NET Core 2.0, which was like a subset of .NET Framework. It was focused on the web and the cloud and exposing those types of server-based technologies. Microsoft now have announced the .NET Core 3, where they also introduced AI and IoT components, but also the desktop components. So this is something I think is pretty cool. You will have WPF and you will have WinForms running in .NET Core 3.0, or actually running on top of .NET Core 3.0. However, it's only for Windows devices, meaning because .NET Core has been like a cross-platform version, and some of these technologies will still be cross-platform, running on Linux and Mac and such, but the desktop components, WPF and WinForms, they are only built for Windows. They are open source though, meaning that if you are really, really aggressive, you could possibly try to migrate them to other stacks as well. I wouldn't recommend it. But I guess it's kind of hairy, but still, it might be done. So Microsoft announced this a couple of months ago, and you can download this if you download the .NET 3.0. You have daily builds of this WPF and WinForms components. And you can run it in Visual Studio 2017. I wouldn't recommend that though. I would prefer Visual Studio Code if I do this, or like a command-based solution, because .NET, the console commands is kind of nice. If you have Visual Studio 2019, it's actually kind of good. So the latest preview that was released Monday, I think it was, yeah, something like that. That works really nice actually. So how does this look? So I have this Visual Studio 2019 solution here. And you have this .NET Core WinForms, and you have .NET Core WPF. So this is actually a WPF application. I can set it up. You can see it's just actually a .NET new. Just to prove it, I can right-click and say which type of framework. It's .NET Core. And I can run it. The designers are not there yet. There are still some clunkiness occasionally in debugging and such, but you can absolutely try it out and evaluate to see if this could work for us. So this is a WPF application running on .NET Core 3, meaning that I can install this on a desktop application that has a different version of .NET Framework, or have a different version of .NET Core as well. I can bundle this together, meaning I can have side-by-side versions of this application with a different version of the .NET Core SDK as well, a .NET Core runtime. This is pretty cool actually. And there's the same for WinForms. Hide some stuff here. So I have the initialize component. I have button click. I can run this as well. And this is a WinForm application. So you should really try it out and just evaluate and see how this works for us. The key thing here is though, what does this actually mean? So Microsoft is building part of the .NET framework into .NET Core, still running on Windows. Why is that important? Well, they have some strong cases for this, I should say. .NET Framework historically has been like, you install the version of .NET Framework on your PC, on your client's PCs, and that's pretty much static. You can upgrade that version of .NET Framework, but your applications also need to be upgraded to that version of .NET Framework. Meaning that when Microsoft does the development on .NET Framework 4.0, 4.8, or 4 going forward, they have to be backwards compatible on earlier versions of those applications that has been built on that different versions of framework. They can't be really aggressive and injecting new features like SIMD instructions and such, because that would break a lot of applications, and they don't want to do that. So then they want to be forward compatible, they want to be backward compatible with that type of version. So they will continue investing and development of .NET Framework if you want to do those type of applications. But for people that want to have like a smoother or a faster ride, which can actually use newest features and newest investigations and investments they do, they have this .NET Core 3.0 WinForm and WPF components applications that you can use. And I think it's key here to understand that these can be these type of applications can be bundled with the version of the SDK or the runtime that they're using, meaning that you can have side-by-side versions of those applications running without having to break other stuff. Once again, it's a container, it's a container, meaning that you can be protected from other stuff running. I think it's a good thing. It will be interesting to see if that will be leveraged by the community though. Because once again, it's a choice. So we have a choice of either sticking around on .NET Framework, continuing doing that what we've done earlier, or we can migrate our applications to this the .NET Core version and actually be possibly be broken the first iteration, and then try to fix those stuff, and then have these side-by-side installations. Once again, I'm really keen on understanding if this is something that looks positive to you, and if something that you would really leverage. So we'll see about that. Okay, so that was a bit about .NET Core 3.0 and also why Microsoft is doing this investment. I don't know if you listened to Dylan yesterday. He also talked about the failure they have with .NET Core being just too little of a subset of the .NET framework. So this is increasing the width and breadth of this platform. I think it's a good thing. So modern experiences. We have chosen our technology. We want to stick around in WPF, or we want to go for UWP. What can we do with experiences? Microsoft has given us this fluent design, animations, rich controls, cool factors, cool concepts and such that we really want to use. But how can we use this in our line of business applications? How can we bring our line of business applications with tables and occasionally maybe a bit more boring user interface into this modern area? Well, Microsoft is doing a lot of changes in the default state of components from this touch-based interface with a lot of margin between controls and such. The default values of those are being more narrow and such, meaning that we can have more information-dense applications. It looks better on a desktop and on a desktop environment, and we can still hook into like a view state saying that, okay, so now I'm running a pure touch environment, so then we want to have a more flexible or more user touch-based experience. They're also bringing in some controls and framework features into the UWP or the modern area, such like windowing APIs. This is something that we haven't been able to do earlier, like having multiple windows in the same application, being modal and a model and such. That's also a really cool thing, actually. If you want to have like a table, when you open up a second window, you close that, you can work around. This what customers are usually comfortable with, and they want to leverage that as well. So if you want to investigate and see what type of controls you can actually leverage and get some excitement, there's a really cool application in the store. It's called XAML Controls Gallery. This is exposing several of the available components, pretty much all of them actually, in not just a demo purpose, but also this is how you use it. It's code-based. You can use this is XAML. This is the code behind. This is how you hook up a Windows animation, a connected animation that flows from one view to another view. It's a really nice thing. And the cool thing with this as well is based on something called the WinUI library. The WinUI library, that is actually an out-of-band release of controls separate from the operating system and the SDKs. So this is something you can download from GitHub, you can contribute to, and you can leverage these type of controls in different types of applications. There's like menus being more like a WinForms experience, or you have this hamburger, the navigation view here. This is also pretty cool because I think this is the WinUI library, and then naturally the controls gallery is that this is based and built on C++/WinRT. So if you want to really learn the technology, try to collaborate in this library, because that will help you understand the language and also the technologies around it. So this is really cool. And I have this, let's see, this XAML controls gallery. Let's see, where am I? Here we are. So one I think is pretty cool then is naturally the, where is it? The motion. We have this connected animations. Here we go. So I have this, and it explains how I get this flow from one item into the next view. And it explains it, and it shows me code, it shows me everything that I want to use. This means that I can build native Windows applications that looks like the native applications in Windows. It looks, it's have a common sense, a common flavor of the Windows 10 platform. And that is also a good thing, because then the users will feel comfortable, and also they will feel that it's a common scheme, and it's a really natural environment to work on. So the WinUI library is pretty cool, something you should also look into. And then we have the other way. So let's say we have a Win32 or we have a Win WPF or a WinForm application. We want to bring this modern world into that desktop application because we can't migrate. We can't move this WinForms application into UWP. It's just a huge investment. It's too expensive. Or we have components, controls, or infrastructure dependencies, external dependencies that we have to rely upon. It can be controls, it can be backend services, it can be different types of stuff. That means that we have to stick around with our old version. So what Microsoft then has done is something called the XAML Islands. Have you heard about this? Okay, somewhere. What this means is actually you can leverage stuff from UWP in your WPF and WinForms applications. You might feel comfortable with this because it has been available to do some of this in WPF and WinForms earlier. We're hosting WPF in WinForms and hosting WinForms in WPF. Remember those type of components, the UI yeah. This is pretty much the same. We can host UWP in WinForms, WPF, and Win32. We can do that in two ways. If we are writing, the operating system is exposing this XAML hosting API, which we can call and leverage, to actually consume these XAML controls that Windows 10 gives us. So if we are a native Win32 application, we have to call this hosting API and then consume these controls. And there's also demos in this the demo I published on the GitHub. You can check that out as well. That is a tough one, but it's doable. The second one is actually, if we are a WPF or WinForms app, we can actually use components from the Windows Community Toolkit, which already are wrappers around some of these XAML controls. There are already completed controls for map and WebView and such, but there are also a XAML host wrapper we can wrap either like buttons or such that is tiny components, or there are also actually documentation on how to actually consume your own user controls or custom controls that you've written for UWP in these WPF applications. Meaning that you can actually build some really cool stuff with inking and such in WinForms or WPF using these latest components. So I mentioned Windows Community Toolkit, and I mentioned it from this XAML host, XAML Islands components, these wrappers, but there's a ton of other cool stuff in this Community Toolkit as well. So this is an alternative toolkit in being more like enthusiastic about what can we do with this platform. You have also these connected animations, and you can do using those type of controls instead. But I want to show you how these stuff work as well. So once again, in this, and you can do this in Visual Studio 2017 as well. I'm just using 2019 this because I thought that was fun. So I don't think I'm gonna bother with the Win32 because I'm sorry, you were too few here. But if you want to check it out, you can do that later on. But if you want to see how like a WPF or a WinForms application look in the main window here, I'm gonna skip the signers because those aren't working. I have this XAML host, which is actually the Microsoft Toolkit WPF UI XAML host. The Microsoft Toolkit once again, if you remember those components. And I have this Windows XAML host, and it says which is the initial type name you want to host here. Well, I want to host a button. So I want to host a Windows UI XAML control, which is a UWP control in WPF. And then in the code behind, I can hook up, let's hide this. I can hook up and see, I can investigate this component. I can hook up click events, the background, and set properties on this control. So when I run, make sure that I'm run the right one here. So now I have a WPF window using a UWP button that actually included in a grid, and or actually set in the form. And if I click it, it just goes blue, because that's pretty much what I said that this delegate to this click event would do. It would set the background to a solid color brush of blue. So this is how easily I can hook up these type of components. And this is in the easiest way when I'm using these standard controls that are already available. If I have user controls or custom controls, there's some more manual work that has to be done. Just to show the code for WinForms, I have a helper method that does this. It sets up this XAML host, which I then set to, in the end I set it to my controls in this form. And I have a UWP button, which is instantiated by a factory class. I set some properties on it. I have this click. I have even IntelliSense. And then I can just specify that this is a child, the button is a child element of my host control, and I put it on the form. So this is how I can inject UWP controls into WinForms applications as well. Is this something that you think you're gonna use? Yep. I'm not that surprised. Because I was thinking that maybe we wanted to actually be more helped with bringing in WinForms controls or WPF controls into UWP without migrating. But there's no alternative for that currently other than using like the desktop bridge and host the entire application and such. But let's hope that Microsoft do some investigations there as well, investments. There are some wrappers that I showed you the Windows XAML host, which you can use there to consume one control at a time. But there have also been some work. These green ones are already available in the Toolkit. We have the WebView, we have map control, we have media player, we have in-canvas. They are working on a graph control. There are some work on a swap chain panel if you want to do like native DirectX calls and such. So it will be interesting to see how that works. I haven't looked to investigate that as well. But I think it's kind of cool to look at the WebView, for instance, because WebView has been one of the components, or actually the web browser, I should say, from WPF and those, that have been used in applications to wrap features and expose features from different types of sites and such. So what Microsoft done now, because Internet Explorer has pretty much gone away, and the rendering and the Trident engine has been not used then, but that's the one that's been used on these web browser controls in earlier applications. So what they've done now is this WebView control, which is only for Windows 10. So if you have a WPF application, which you want to run on pure Windows 10 clients, you can use this control, this hosted UWP component in your WPF application, but it's only for Windows 10. But if you have clients that also run on Windows 7 or earlier, not earlier, but Windows 7 or I guess 8 as well, they have this WebView compatible component as well. It's a subset, but it will use Edge, the rendering end of Edge on Windows 10. It will use Trident on Windows 7. So it handles that naturally for us. And also that's a cool thing, just to be able to, if we're planning on migrating into UWP, we can use this component moving forward constantly. I've tried to get an understanding on, so what does this mean looking forward when Edge is moving away from their own rendering engine into Chromium. I haven't really been, I haven't gotten a good answer about that yet, so we'll see about that, because that would mean that we can run Chromium in our UWP application as well. So just to give you a heads up why I think this is a cool thing as well, I have this small demo here on WebView WPF. So this is, I can just run it. This is the three components, the web browser, the WebView. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. It's the web browser, it's the WebView, and the WebView compatible component running on in WPF on my Windows 10 machine. So the web browser has this HTML5 test. It has a score of 312. The WebView control has 489, which is much, much better, meaning that it's a good standard-based, a better standard-based rendering of web views, or web content. And the WebView compatible actually has similar scores because it's using the same engine, same rendering engine as the WebView here, naturally. So still, I think it could be a good thing just to migrate into that component if you want to use something in your WPF component, just to get a better experience of the web in your WPF applications. There's some limitations in XAML Islands. I think it's a cool technology, but it will be interesting to see how it gets used and leveraged. There's some issues with DPI, and that's unfortunate because most of our computers, like the Surface devices, they have higher DPI in 100%, meaning that there's some rendering issues that you have to manually handle. Also, like for accessibility, narrator doesn't really work here, and there are some brushes and such that has to be handled as well. But they're getting there, and there's a lot of work being done on it as well. Okay, so those were experiences. I also talked about distribution, or actually how we deploy applications. And this is also interesting because there's some hurdles, there's some challenges that we want to fix with distribution, going trying to leverage sort of a web-based deployment technology where we can like upgrade once and it just deploys out where, and there's some technologies for that, like click once and such. But the problem is that installers put things everywhere. They put stuff in registry, they put stuff on the file, and looking back into .NET Core, we want to have like maybe different versions of the runtime or the frameworks running side by side. How is that being handled today? It isn't. So we have to fix that as well. We have to have this containerized environment running in. Updates. So when we write a new application or a new version, should it be automatically updated? How do we handle that? Or should it be manually? How can we fix that? Can we have APIs, or do we have APIs that we can ask the service a new version for our client application that has to be downloaded? Or what happens when the user downloads a new version? And also, when the user are done with the application, really wants to uninstall, how can we make sure that that really disappears? What Microsoft has done is took all of these different types of experiences of installing applications on Windows and created a unified technology called MSIX. And MSIX is sort of a packaging technology that looks very similar to Apex in UWP. It's a sandbox. It's something that means that when you install this zip or this MSIX package, you will feel comfortable that the bits that you are installing are the bits that was intended to be put on your machine. It's secure, meaning that it's hashed, it's checksummed and such, meaning that you can't inject stuff into it after it has been signed. That's a safety feature for tamper protection, for instance. It also means that when we upgrade or update our applications, we can make sure that we optimize the network resources and the file resources, making sure that we only bring down stuff that are new. We don't have to bring down the 150 megabytes or 150 gigabytes when it comes to games, going to this over the network and down to the client computers. We can just bring down the packages that are updated, meaning that we have a very fast update process. And when we uninstall, we can make sure that we uninstall everything. We don't leave stuff behind. So that's also a good thing. Also, when it comes to updates, we have these features where we can have the update, the user prompted and saying, hey, there's a new version of this application. Do you want to update it? And we update it. Or we can have sort of a mandatory update, meaning that we have to update to the latest version. It will happen in the background, and the next time the user runs this application, it will be the latest version. So we can have these forced down. And we also have this API to check. So when we're running the application, you can tell the user, hey, there's a new version. We really want you to update because there's a security fix or something. Stop running it and update now. Please do. And it looks as it would be coming from the Windows Store, pretty much, if you've seen that before. So how can you do this? Well, it's actually a new project template, which we can install in Visual Studio 2017. And we can then just run this application template and it will then hook up our WPF or WinForms or Win32 application. We can be able to, we have the properties of specifying the manifest, the capabilities of this application, and how it will be actually deployed, and also something like the splash screen and icons and tiles and such. Doing cool stuff with polling and pulling stuff from tile and some of those. Or we can be a bit more console-based. There's console-based commands as well for this, instead of if we don't want to use templates or guides. I'm not going to show this because it's not that fun. You can check it out in the demonstrations. I just packaged the WebView application, meaning that I packaged a WPF application using UWP components and deploying it to my computer as an MSIX package or an application update, and meaning that I have this sandbox environment running, and it looks like a Windows Store application with the same feature set. It's a pretty cool. Maybe I should run it. Yeah, I think so. And let's do this. So what I've done, I'm gonna close all of these windows. Yep. I'm way ahead of you. So I have this MSIX package. I pointed to the WebView, the WPF component, the application I just ran. I can select some of these assets, the logos. I also have this manifest in which I can specify capabilities. I can specify what I want this to be called, other types of content URIs, packaging and such. This is pretty much similar to standard UWP. And then I can run this. And I run the package application pretty much as I run a Apex application. Now it's running the same application. However, it's running it from Visual Studio, but it's deployed to my computer. So I have this now in here. This is a TechDays WebView, and I can run it again. And I can also naturally uninstall it. So make sure that everything disappears. With that said, there are several of other technologies that are interesting, being native as well, like the Microsoft Graph or mixed realities APIs that Jessica and Jim has talked about, doing some really cool stuff on with UWP, maybe using Unity or something like that, Babylon.js or other technologies. Also machine learning and such that you can really include in your rich client applications. I'm not going to go into that now. There's some stuff on Blazor that you can do as well using UWP applications running in the browser. And then there's some really cool frameworks, external frameworks like Mono and Urho, which is pretty much like virtual reality applications being built C# with sort of like a Mono-based experience. You can use progressive web apps, or you can use JavaScript-based some APIs like React Native or Electron. There's a lot of different ways of building rich client applications on Windows. So this was actually pretty much just giving you a heads up on where Microsoft is doing their investment on the native stack being several different technologies. And in retrospective, or sort of a summary of this application, there is a huge client potential. There's a lot of computers out there where you can actually target with your client applications with rich experiences and such. But it's a symbiotic relationship, because there are some issues that Microsoft is having in getting customers realizing that there's a store. There are tons of cool applications in the Windows Store, and they are available for free. There are some applications available for charge as well, but there's tons of applications. You don't even have to have a Microsoft account. You can download stuff anyway. But the store itself is kind of, people are unaware of it. So we also have this relationship with, as a partner to Microsoft and a developer, to maybe publish our applications there, but Microsoft also has to invest better in exposing the stores to different types. And they are doing some huge investments there as well. We also have to remember that we don't have to replace all our applications. We can migrate, or we can consume what we really need from UWP in our old applications. I shouldn't say old or legacy. It's still valued applications, but we can do it with different types of perspectives. And we have the choice of choosing technologies and choosing stacks that we want to use, and also an opportunity to actually influence. I showed you several of these links, or actually at least frameworks that are available that we can actually influence and contribute to. Writing code, helping with documentation, giving feedback upon and saying that this is something that's really valuable for us. With that said, once again, the choice that we are being provided with by Microsoft, it might be a good thing, but we also should reach out to Microsoft and say, okay, I understand we have choices, but what should we do? What should we really invest in when looking forward? If I want to be safe in the investment I'm doing today, I want to be safe in 10 years from now, what should I invest in? Is it Win32? Is it UWP? Is it WinForms? Or is it WPF? Or whatever? And I'm sorry to say that they will probably just say, it's up to you. And I've been there as well. I was highly responsible in Sweden for telling people that, okay, so you have WCF, you have ASMX, and you have remoting. So what should you do? Well, it's up to you. And the same with XAML or WPF and Silverlight and such. So we need to be better of proactively recommending the right stuff to move forward. Currently, we have choices, and we have to look to Microsoft to say, okay, thanks for the choices, tell us what to do. And with that, I say thank you, and I really appreciate you coming here. Thank you.